Welcome to V is for Victory, a podcast about how small businesses overcome big battles. I'm your host, Jill Miller of Vera Creative, a boutique marketing firm in the Chicagoland area where I'm also a part-time professor of an advertising course. Join me as I talk with entrepreneurs about the challenges they faced as well as their strategies for success. Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to V is for Victory. We are in episode 46. If you have listened to any of the other 45, I say plus episodes because we have mini episodes in there, and you have gotten some valuable content out of them, please leave a review, download the episode, share the episode, like, comment, give me a follow on social media, on the podcast platforms. Really, truly would appreciate it. Helps it get seen. And it honestly, it means so much to a small business owner as I'm pouring my time and energy into this. Just to know and see that it is making a difference is super important to me. So please take a moment to do that. If you are a national brand, because my podcast has a national reach and you are looking for an affordable way to advertise, please consider sponsoring the show. We can talk about what that means. You can email jill.miller@veracreative.com. All right, so episode 46 finds me talking with Patty Block. Patty has a really unique perspective. How she kind of came to her services came from this really unique perspective. I don't want to give it all away, but it's like a broken cookie phenomenon, and so I'll let her explain that to you guys. But the gist of her services is she helps women price their services so they're not selling themselves short. And this is something that I have really struggled with for a long time. I had my pricing, and it was a take it or leave it. If you're not going to pay it, then I move on. And I need to get back to that space because it's a much more powerful space to be in. I think if you're anything like me, what happens is you make excuses. Well, some money is better than no money, or, oh, I feel bad and I really want to help this business owner out. And, so I'm just going to cheapen myself to do that. But really that doesn't help anybody out. And Patty and I, we dive into that, and we dive into the whys and the whats that's behind selling ourselves short. I hope you enjoy the show. So Patty, I just want to welcome you to the show, and I want to hear your story and how you came up with the broken cookie effect.
I'm so glad to be here. And I work with women business owners who are experts in their fields. And often they're technical experts like accountants, attorneys, marketing and PR professionals, engineers, and they often have come out of corporate, and they are experts at what they do, but they may not be or feel like they're experts at running a business. And I started seeing these patterns over the years. I founded my company in 2006. So all these years I've been noticing patterns with women business owners, and I didn't quite have the language around that until I realized that when I was growing up, my mom used to make these fabulous cookies. The whole house smelled good. It was warm. The cookies were gooey. And all my life, I watched my mom eat the broken cookies. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I even thought to ask her, why do you only eat the broken cookies? Do they taste better? And she laughed and said, no, I eat the broken cookies so you can have the whole ones. And not too long ago, I saw this really shocking statistic. 62% of women rely on their business for their primary income. And 88% of women business owners make less than $100,000 a year. And all of a sudden, this image of my mom eating the broken cookies popped in my head. And I realized that is what I'm seeing in this pattern, is that we are bringing that behavior, that thinking of everybody else gets the whole cookie and we live on crumbs. And we're bringing that right into our businesses and creating a self-imposed glass ceiling. And the good news is you can change that. You have the ability, the power to bust through that glass ceiling because it's artificial. but a lot of women don't realize that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's I've noticed a similar phenomenon with women apologizing. And I do it too. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You know, at the grocery store, if somebody walks in front of me, oh, I'm sorry. It's kind of like, why am I apologizing and what am I sorry for? I didn't do anything. You cut me off or something like that. And it's just, where do you think it comes from?
I think some of it is our conditioning
Hmm.
and also watching our role models, our mothers and our grandmothers. And it's very ingrained in us to be quiet, to be clean. The two worst things I could do in my house growing up were make a noise and make a mess.
I'm laughing. The worst things our kids can do too. And you know what? It's actually my husband who is the I thought I was a clean freak. Oh my goodness. But no, then I met my match and my husband. um, but yeah, yeah. So, not letting kids be kids, right?
Right.
And not letting yourself be successful, like being your own worst enemy in a sense, and holding back because you don't want others to maybe think you're too successful. Or what are some of the things clients say to you as their why they get in their own way?
Yes, I think there are a couple things. The broken cookie effect, what I call it, is very pervasive. I see it virtually with every woman business owner, and I've done that too. And part of it is recognizing it in myself.
Yeah.
I think what I hear most is fear.
Mm.
There's so much fear underneath everything we're doing, all the decisions we're making, and all the actions we're taking or maybe not taking. We tend to avoid a lot of things because they feel like conflict. So there are two things that I see are very common with women. One is that we're very risk averse, and the other is that we are fear underlines a lot of what we do and think, and we make decisions based on fear, which can often work against us.
Mm.
So, for example, if you think about your pricing, and I believe everything stems from pricing.
Nailed it. At least for
Right.
me. I know where this is. Continue.
Exactly. So it is, I don't know that I've ever met a woman business owner that I think is pricing appropriately for the value she brings.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's start with pricing. So everything flows from pricing because what happens, especially with women, is we undervalue ourselves and we underprice our services, and then we overdeliver. So any profit that we think we have goes poof,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's that first piece of that pricing. But the other is then if you think your prices are not appropriate, maybe they need to be raised, maybe we need to add structure, then we're afraid to do that because we're afraid we're going to get pushback or people will react badly or there'll be some kind of conflict. So we avoid that because it's so much simpler just to leave things the way they are.
And I
So, yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say in terms of undervalue, underprice, and overdeliver, and I think that again goes back to that fear piece of not being liked or the not wanting to let people down, the people pleasing. I think women do that a lot as well. So I know that's my struggle. I'm always like, well, I feel bad. Everything comes down to I feel bad. I feel bad if I charge too much, right? I don't know. But I don't know why I feel bad. Why should I feel bad? You know?
Exactly. And that not only keeps our companies artificially small,
Mm,
but it keeps us from reaching out to others. So, have you ever had the feeling that you're bothering somebody?
right. Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I don't want to bother them. I don't want to trouble them. That's very old and ingrained. And that keeps you from reaching out and building relationships.
Right. Yeah. Mm. Okay. So what are some of the things that you help women overcome so that they can kind of knock down that self-imposed glass ceiling?
The first step is always awareness. And so one of the things that I do is I offer a quiz called myrevenueroadblocks.com. And that helps women determine what are those roadblocks that I'm dealing with and how can I recognize what's in my way? Because that's the first big piece that we have to address is I don't even really know everything that is causing problems for me. Once you're aware of it, then a lot of people don't think they have the power to change it. They really feel as though I'm stuck. And I hear that a lot. I'm stuck. I'm trapped. I can't make changes because of this. I am not comfortable to make changes because of this. So they very much do a dance around what some of the real issues are and how to affect change because there's just so much fear and that keeps us paralyzed. So that's that first piece. Once there is awareness, then I have a method that I use to help shift your mindset and look at things differently. And I'll give you an example. Perfect. One of the things I hear all the time is, well, I price based on what the market can bear.
Oh, okay.
And there's no such thing because I believe that there's a price point for every buyer. Perhaps you're trying to sell to the wrong people. Perhaps you need to niche down into a specific industry. Perhaps you need to be looking at innovative ways of structuring your pricing and talking about your pricing so that people really get it and understand the value that you're bringing. So all of those pieces can be addressed once you've shifted your thinking and you don't buy into the old myths. So that's that first step. And then I have specific programs that help you build your pricing model, communicate well. It's a really tricky issue, especially for technical experts, because sometimes we can't find the words to talk about our pricing or our services in a way that resonates with our buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. I run into that with business owners all the time. They can't even talk about their products, let alone their pricing. They know why they like their products, but they can't articulate. They're not good at talking about themselves, about how they got into business, why they got into business, sharing their story. Like we kind of talked about earlier, dealing with their why. And it's interesting that like what you hear a lot is pricing per the market. I am not even in tune with what anybody else in my industry is charging, to be honest with you, other than like large marketing firms. I know they'll throw out a proposal for 80 grand for a marketing plan. I think the most I've ever charged is 5,000 or 6,000 for a marketing plan. And it was 40 pages of information. Talk about over delivering for that price. It wasn't just one quick PowerPoint presentation that I pitched to the client. For me, my struggle is I look at the business owner and I'm like, well, you're just starting out and you're not making money yet. There's there's that point in your business where your branding is so important. Your logo is so important. Your website, how you first establish and set up your, your lead generations and your follow up and all that stuff is so incredibly important. But what I find with a lot of mompreneurs or solo entrepreneurs is they really don't invest in the marketing piece. And they just think that it's kind of like, well, I took a marketing class, I can do it. Or, oh, I'll have a friend do this logo. And then, a couple years down the line, they want to put it on a shirt, but they don't have the right file type. Or why is it getting blurry when I upload it to this social media platform? Well, it was never, created properly. You don't have the right forms, that type of stuff. And things become disjointed because they don't make that upfront investment because they either push it to the side and don't realize how important it is, or they don't do the groundwork to save up the money to invest. So then I always end up pricing so low to be affordable. I'll give you an example. I just created a website for somebody for like $500. A whole entire website. I wrote all the content. developed the whole thing for $500. I think you probably know that, I mean, anybody listening can probably say like, wow, that's really cheap. Like, and if you don't know, then do some research because that's really, really very, very cheap. And I did it in under a month. So it wasn't like this person paid the price of having to wait for a long time for the final piece to be delivered either. Um, so I just share that with you in case there's anything in there that you're picking up on that your clients also that you hear a lot, or just any thoughts that you have on my excuse.
Well, what I would say is to be very careful because as humans, we tend to equate low price with low quality and high price with high quality.
Yeah.
So when I talk about driving value with your pricing, that's really what I mean. That when you price so low or you offer discounts that nobody asked for, which is another big thing we do as women, is we
Yeah.
have a price, but then we say, oh, and I'll give you a 20% discount.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So then you have just discounted the value of what you've provided. So all of those things that we tend to do are based in insecurity. And you're right, it's people pleasing. We want people to like us. We don't want to let anybody down. We want the work. And we think any buyer who comes to us is an ideal buyer. And if they're not, we can turn them into one, which is kind of like what happened when you first started dating. And anyone who showed interest in you was the one.
Right.
And if they
Right.
weren't the one, you could change them into that.
Right. Right.
Well, we do the same thing with our buyers in our business. And that is part of that glass ceiling. It is self-imposed. It keeps us stuck. And you can't be profitable if you're charging $500 for a website. It's lovely that you're doing that to help the business owner, but that is really going to hinder your business. And the person that you just helped may not value what you just did. You just did a Herculean thing for a tiny amount of money. And so in a way, kind of discounting your own value.
Well, and I agree with that. And I agree that it's actually a disservice to the client because it tells the client you don't need to invest in these things.
That's true.
And it does a disservice to others in my industry because it says, well, I can go over here and get it for cheap if I'm this person that has this mindset that doesn't value, the quality or anything like that. So, and I always say that too. Like, I think there's so many people that get started with a consultant and they have a bad experience with it, and then they're kind of trigger shy and they don't want to try me out. And then I look at them and I say, oh, those people are, making it harder for industry professionals who actually do a good job. Well, I'm doing the same thing with my cheap pricing. So, but I think, a big piece of what I tell my clients to do is to educate their audience. And that is, I need to kind of walk my talk there and do it myself. I need to educate my clients when they come to me and say, this is how much a website charges. And when their jaw hits the floor, because most people don't know, I can say, and here's some articles, here's some research, or you can do your own and see that I'm not wrong, or, put it nicely. But so, yeah, I definitely, I think it does do a disservice not only to myself, but also to the client. And it does set this type of expectation with very little boundaries. It starts out the relationship with little boundaries. And I think the other thing is like, I went a very long time without having clients. And so then when you start getting referrals and I got very good at saying, this is my pricing, take it or leave it. And then, life changes. You have 2 kids. Now we have 3 coming along. And it's like, well, some money's better than no money, right? Like, I think a lot of people say that, well, something is better than nothing. So I'm just going to do what I can to get the client or get the sale.
Yes. And that's very short-term thinking,
Mm-hmm.
which really hinders your long-term plans. So if you
Yeah.
have plans to grow your company, you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. The other thing I'll mention is when you set the prices artificially low, and then a year, 2 years from now, your client wants a refresh, or they want to rebrand, or maybe they've shifted their services. If you've raised your prices, now they're going to have sticker shock
Yeah.
because you've set the expectations so low. And I see that happen very frequently. So then you feel guilty, like you have to offer another discount or
Yeah. Oh, you're grandfathered into my great low rate.
exactly. And so that then it perpetuates itself and it becomes harder and harder to talk about what your pricing is and why you are worth that, why that value is really there. You know the value is there, but your clients may not.
Hmm. I totally agree. And I love that you brought up the short-term thinking because I, in particular, have one client I'm right now that I'm trying to kind of retrain the way that this client thinks. And I keep saying, that short term, we got to look at the long term. You got, and I think as women and mothers, and many of them, they're doing the grocery shopping, they're doing the this, they're doing the that, they're doing all the things, they're taking care of the kids, they're trying to build a business. We get into some type of routine that almost, I'm minute to minute. Ask me what I'm doing tomorrow at 2 and I don't know because it depends on what my child is doing.
Yeah.
And so that minute to minute thinking becomes ingrained in us mothers and us women, because we're just trying to keep afloat. We're just trying to keep our head above water, right? And you're right. I think a lot of people, and I know I've talked about this on my show before, a lot of people don't understand how much of their personality and their personal way of being and their mindset carries over into their business when they become business owners. All those, fears that used to be, of, oh, I don't like my hair or I don't like my legs, right? Like turn into, this fear of like, well, I can't put this website out there. I'm not sure if people are going to like it, type of thing. So anyways, I share that as well because I think it's just very hard once you've established a way of being in your life to do a 180 and establish a completely different way of being and approach in your business.
Yes, I would agree with that. And especially for the population that I work with, where we're all experts at what we do, you absolutely are going to be bringing your personality, your behavior traits into your business. And that is often a really good thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
also what makes you different than others in your market.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to discount that. We want to build on that. And you touched on something a minute ago that I think is really important, and that's how we talk about ourselves. And I'm based in Texas, and we have a saying here, it's not bragging if it's true.
I love it.
And that is a huge problem for women because we don't want to talk about ourselves, our skills, our achievements, because we feel like we're bragging. And that's not how we were raised.
Right.
So, again, going back to that conditioning and the way that I teach women how to talk about the value they bring and their experience, their expertise, the achievements, the kinds of results they've gotten for their clients. The way that I teach women to talk about that makes it so much easier when you then couple that with a pricing model that has structure and rationale. Then all of a sudden it's easier to talk about your pricing. It's much more effective and your buyers really understand it better. So that all comes together to mean that you're going to be working with the people you want to work with. You're going to get great results for them, and you're going to be compensated in a way that allows your company to be profitable, but also that whole scenario feels so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what is it? look like when you say you help women discover the language, what exactly are like is your business approach now? Are you on coaching calls with people? Are you giving them task lists? Are you helping them rewrite copy script? Like what is the bread and butter of what you're doing on a daily basis for your clients?
There are three ways that I help my clients. One is one-on-one consulting. And in that case, I'm working with individuals who have built their business. Usually they've been in business between 3 to 10 years, maybe.
Mhm.
So they've gotten a good start, they've brought in revenue, and they're doing pretty well. But they know there are opportunities there that they're missing. And so they know that there's a better way to do this, but they don't know how. So that's really what I teach. And that one-on-one consulting includes my online programs. It includes 2 meetings a month and unlimited calls and emails. So they have a lot of access to ask me questions. We work on specific things based on their priorities. So it's very customized.
Mhm.
The second way to work with me is in the Revenue Roundtable. And that is a group of very curated group of women business owners who are all on the same journey. They're experts in different industries, but they're all working to build their business. They all believe that their pricing is off, and they feel very uncomfortable with selling. So those are the two biggest issues, is pricing and selling.
Selling, yeah.
And the Revenue
Mhm.
Roundtable meets twice a month. And again, it's that strength of the group and the fact that you have people who are challenging you as well as supporting you. So
Yeah.
that's Revenue Roundtable. And then the third way are my online programs. One is called Painless Selling to Ideal Buyers, and the other is Value Driven Pricing. And actually, when you sign up for Revenue Roundtable, you you get access to value-driven pricing because that is the common language that we're using in Revenue Roundtable. So that's included, and you can also buy it separately if you choose to. And the value-driven pricing is about shifting your mindset around pricing, around money and your relationship with money. And then it's the mechanics of how do you build a pricing model? What's important to include and not include? How do you talk about your pricing in a way that feels so much better and you feel so much more confident? And then Painless Selling takes that next step to help you develop a sales process that I developed specifically for women business owners. And what I often say is make sure that you've got your pricing aligned with value, because otherwise you can sell as much as you want and you're still not going to be profitable.
Yep. This is such good content. So take me back a few steps. I want to switch gears a little bit, but take me back a few steps before you got into this consulting role. What's your resume look like?
Sure. So this is the second company that I've owned. The
Mhm.
first focused on political consulting and lobbying, and I loved it. It was fascinating, and I'd never do it again.
Somebody actually just referred to me, somebody who's running for senator.
Mhm.
so so I thought, oh, this is interesting. I've never had that type of client before.
Right. And it is a really interesting world, and I learned a tremendous amount. I had always been very passionate about politics,
Mhm.
and so for years I was a volunteer. And then people started offering to pay me and recognize my expertise, I think, before I did.
Mm.
So I became a political consultant working with candidates. Primarily, it was helping them understand how to campaign and how to build their campaign. But it was also a tremendous amount of communication skills
Mm.
and different techniques. And so, for example, anytime you see a political debate, you will see that every candidate will answer the question they want to answer rather than the question they're asked.
Yeah.
And that is a very specific technique that I
Hmm.
teach.
Okay.
And so
Useful for sales as well.
it is useful for sales, and it helps you remain calm cool, and collected
Mm-hmm.
because you always know what your message is. So it's not manipulative. It is actually a very common and valuable strategy to use so that you're not caught off guard.
Mm-hmm.
And in politics, we often see people use it in a negative way.
Yeah.
But in the real world, we can use that in a positive way.
Right, right.
So for 8 years, I had that company. And then I had a surprise divorce and 3 little kids at home,
Mm.
and realized very quickly that I was going to be on my own financially, logistically, emotionally. And one of the challenges with the lobbying in particular was the travel.
Mm.
So I knew that I needed to be home. At that time, my youngest was about 2.
Oh, yeah. That's so
And
little.
yes, and my whole world turned upside down.
Mm.
So because of that, I closed my business and I went to get a job and ended up at an international school where I was director of development, handling marketing, public relations, and fundraising, and then became director of operations and was there for almost 9 years. And that also was a great, great opportunity for me because it was a landing place for me. And I learned a huge amount. I always knew I was going to start my company again,
Mm.
but I knew I wanted to focus on small business owners because of some of the frustrations that I had with my first company. I knew that I wanted to focus on women business owners in particular because we face different challenges than the guys do. And I was waiting for my kids to get older and more independent. So as they did, then I felt like I could take that leap of faith and start this company, which I did in 2006.
One of my favorite quotes, and this is another thing that I have mentioned on the show before, is when opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. And I think that any major setback has so many things that we can learn from it. And it's almost like as a society, we're moving towards not letting kids fail, not teaching people how to be resilient, not teaching people that not everybody wins. But I think that there's so much value in having a setback. And I think if that's one common thing among all of my podcast guests, it's that they've had some type of setback or major event in their life that could have just knocked them on their feet, right? And you could have just stayed back in the corporate world, but you knew that that wasn't maybe where you provided the most value or truly belonged, and it was back out on your own, and you took the steps necessary to get to rebuild that. That's hard to do. That's very hard to do, especially rebuilding it with a completely different set of like a completely different target market, right? You were from consulting to political candidates to women entrepreneurs.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. It was a lot of change, and I had to make some really intentional decisions. One of the things I believe, and I've taught my kids, is you will get knocked down. The difference between people is how you get back up
Mm-hmm.
and what you choose to do going forward. And I think people, and especially women, as business owners, we often think we don't have choices. And I run into that a lot. We think this is just the way it is.
Mm.
And I reject that, because if you're unhappy, if you are not as accomplished or achieving the things you want to achieve in your business, then you don't have to lump it and you don't have to struggle. Your business doesn't have to be a burden. And part of what I hear from my clients is they tend to fall back in love with their business.
Mm.
They've gotten to a point where it's not quite so much fun as it
Yeah.
was at the beginning, and
Yeah.
they're feeling very, very much like they're pulling it along instead of pushing it along. And because of that, it feels like a burden. And that is part of what I teach and help people understand is your business doesn't have to be a burden. And I take so much joy from what I do, the kind of work I do, the people I get to work with, the results that we achieve together, it is so joyful. And that is what I want to bring to every woman business owner.
Yeah. And 99% of the time, that's how I talk about my business. The last few months went during this first trimester of this pregnancy. I've been so sick. And boy, that sucks the joy out of working.
Yes,
Oh my
exactly.
goodness. Something you phrase that one of the phrases I find most cringy is "it is what it is." And I
Yes.
don't know if that's my inability to accept things, because I have a hard time accepting things when they're not fair or they're not right, or but "it is what it is" drives me crazy. That saying drives me crazy. I want something that you said about intentional decisions. Those are two powerful words when put together. Can you flush that out a little bit more for my audience?
Sure. This goes back to feeling like we don't have choices. In many ways, we feel like we don't have power, even when we are the boss. And it's a hugely frustrating situation. You do have more power than you realize, but if you don't recognize that or don't choose to use it, then you have that feeling of it is what it is, right? That kind of
Mhm.
defeatist attitude. Well, this is just the way it has to be. And when we strategize, which is really a huge focus of what I do with my
Mm,
clients, is
good. Yeah.
help them start by strategizing. What is it you want? And keep in mind, as women, we have not been taught to think that way. We were not asked when we were growing up, what do you want? There were certain expectations that everyone had of us. For me, growing up in my family, it was as a girl, I would get my education, I would get married, and I would have children.
Mhm.
Period. End of sentence. And the older I got, as I got to be a teenager, as I went to college, the older I got, the more angry I got because I cared so much about having a career. I wanted a family. There's no doubt I wanted a family. And that has enriched my life. But I also felt so strongly about my career, and I felt very angry that that was not only not expected of me, but it was kind of take it or leave it, right?
Mm,
We don't really care one way or another if you have a
mhm,
career, but
mhm,
I cared. So having that intent, knowing what you want, and then basing your decisions on that, that is a proactive way of going through the world. And as women, we often are very reactive. And that goes back exactly to what you were saying a minute ago. When you have, especially little kids, you have to be in that moment
mhm.
and you can't plan ahead because everything you're doing is contingent on those little people,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
that certainly was my situation as a single mom, that everything was contingent on these three kids who outnumber me, who are wonderful children. And I have so much writing on this and so much responsibility. And so when I say my world turned upside down, part of my being able to take control of that situation was in figuring out what my kids needed and what I wanted. So I knew my kids needed stability, and what I wanted was to raise good human beings and have a career. So, in order to achieve those things, I needed to strategize and figure out how was I going to raise good human beings, taking my role as a role model very seriously. I was pretty much the only parent, and I was the only positive parental role model. So, if that's the case, there's a lot writing on this.
Mm, mhm,
And so, figuring out what I wanted, what was important to me, what my values are, then I can take that, and I did take that and say, here's my dilemma, here's my situation. How do I make this happen? And so while I was working at the international school, well, of course, the first decision was I had to close my business.
yeah, that's hard. That's a hard decision.
It was very hard, and I
Yeah.
grieved a lot. It
Oh,
was a very
yeah.
hard decision.
That's a loss in itself, for
It
sure.
is. It
Mhm.
is. And so when I made that decision, that was the first step to, okay, one way that I'm going to achieve having a career, building my business, going back into business, is by taking a job temporarily and saving like a madwoman.
Mm.
And that is what I did. And so that when I was ready to start my company, I had also very intentionally reconnected with a lot of people so that I could start my company with clients.
Mm.
And it was, there was never a point that it was easy. It's never going to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of running a business.
Yep.
There are lots of ups and downs and challenges. But going back to the falling down and how do you get up analogy, you have to have faith in business that you will get knocked down, you will have failures, you will have disappointments, people will let you down.
Oh, yeah.
And it's how you get back up that makes all the difference. So that intentional decision making is a critical piece, because otherwise you're making decisions based on how you're reacting to things. And that is part of your glass ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the strategy portion, because that's something that I think I bring to the table for my clients, that they're in execution mode, they're in that survival mode in their business, and they're doing, but they're doing without analyzing, and they're doing without reasoning, and they're doing without changing up the message per the particular target, all the things that strategy encompasses in terms of marketing for your business. And so I love that you brought strategy into intentional decision making. And you're right, when you're using strategy to make intentional decisions, you have a lot more options, right? You can say, okay, this might work and we can go in this direction, or there's this strategy that we could apply, which could result in this. And you can kind of look at other businesses and see what their strategies are and how their results are. And you're not left without direction, maybe is the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
And another thing that came to mind, that the man that I trained for yoga under is always quoting Emerson, and I know I've quoted it, but it's so powerful. Do the thing and you'll have the power.
Mm-hmm.
Do the thing and you'll have the power. And it's just, to me, that's just such a lovely quote, right? And whatever it is, whatever decision or whatever is holding you back, do the thing and you'll have the power.
I think that's very powerful and will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. This has been really helpful for me. I mean, I feel like I turned it into the all Jill show here, telling you about my hangups, but I think it's good, for listeners to get a sense of, like, every business owner, and especially female entrepreneurs struggle, especially mompreneurs struggle with this similar thing. So hopefully people listening have heard a little bit of themselves in me and a little bit of themselves in you. I admire you, Patty, because I think you're very strong when you talk about falling and the way you get back up. That it takes a very strong person to not just fall apart. Falling apart is the easy thing to do, and giving up is the easy thing to do. And like I said, you could have sold your business and stayed in the corporate world, and it would have been the easy thing to do. So I admire you a lot for that, and thank you for helping people like me. Where can people connect with you and learn more about you and your services?
Well, the best place is theblockgroup.net. So my website is theblockgroup.net. And I'd like to offer your audience a quiz. It's myrevenueroadblocks.com. And when you take the quiz, it will help you start with step one, which is raising your awareness of what roadblocks are in your way in terms of generating more revenue. A lot of what I do is focused on helping you generate more revenue with less stress. And so myrevenueroadblocks.com, I would encourage you to take the quiz, and you'll get a report that will lay out for you some of the common myths that we're dealing with, that will bring some of that to your awareness and give you a first step in how to deal with those roadblocks.
That's lovely. And I will put those in the episode notes, those links, so people can click right on them and get to your content. Patty, thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom and for sharing your story with me today. And I am never eating a broken cookie again. I'm taking the whole one.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.